My name is Jorja Fleezanis. I'm professor of violin and orchestral studies at the Jacobs School of Music. When I came to Bloomington in 2009, I had just left a major career as a concertmaster for 20 years with the Minnesota Orchestra, a job that was demanding on every possible level, physically, mentally, creatively, command of a large ensemble, dictating the direction, artistic direction of that ensemble, working with an amazing array of conductors and soloists. All of that material came with me. And when it came with me to teach at a major music school, one of the things that I was left with feeling was there are lots of ideas in my head, lots of ideas that would have been going into a job that I just left, and that I needed to now put into a greater kind of input into the workplace I was now finding myself, which was a one-on-one relationship with students, and of course working with the orchestra program, which is working with a large ensemble, but it was more as an assisting mentor and coach, what I love doing, don't get me wrong. But there was something else that I felt I wanted to contribute to that program, which would give more depth, meaning, perspective on what each orchestral piece owns in its essence. It's the meat of itself, the meat of its historical context, the composers themselves, and an in-depth look like that is very hard to do in a regular cycle for any of our orchestras. So it came upon me, this idea of creating what I've known to be other such projects in other situations, mostly, actually only one in Chicago at the Civic Orchestra, to do a 1 week or 1 cycle project with one orchestra where we would look at a single work and use it as a cross-germination or interdisciplinary collaboration with either scholars or people that have studied the composer and know that person and those works in depth, and embed that into the learning of that single piece. So it required my using a huge array of contacts that I had through my late husband, Michael Steinberg, who was somebody who knew many of these musicologists. And so I felt very familiar and kind of at ease with contacting them, which was sort of actually another beautiful thing about my idea of doing this, because he died right before I came here, and I felt somehow his not being with me would be somehow brought into play in this actually rather marvelous way of becoming an educator that combined the things that he and I actually did together many times at summer festivals, working collaboratively with his musical background in musicology and mine as a performer. So I started this project, and I chose works that I felt were either iconic works, like the Beethoven Fifth Symphony, Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, Debussy's La Mer, a Brahms symphony, of course, felt important to me, his first symphony, especially since it was the hardest one to be given birth to, and by him, and a Shostakovich symphony, which I think really had to be something we looked at beyond just the notes, because it comes out of such a turbulent and difficult kind of psychological framework for a composer to live in and work in. And now to come to this this year's behind the score work, which is the Bruckner Seventh. Now, Bruckner is not a composer that is done often at a school, and if it's done, it's usually the Fourth Symphony, which is one that has been done here. But I have a relationship with the Seventh Symphony that's really, again, sort of not only personal by what I know of it, but also it's one that when I've played it, I've also find myself going into an area of musical engagement that's pretty rare. It's a work that stems from a composer who lived so deeply in a religious atmosphere. I mean, he lived in a monastery and played in the church at St. Florian near outside of Linz from the age of 12 until he was close to the age of almost 39. So he spent an immense part of his basic upbringing in the thrall of a religious environment and was unbelievably devout as a result of that. And his music was hard to come to as far as his symphonies. His first symphony was also done very late in his life, like Brahms, at 40. And his his main instrument, of course, was the organ. So the organ, combined with the cathedral and the affect of all of this mysticism that religion creates, is the birthplace of his music. So of course the music is transcendent. It goes beyond. It's not really earthly music in that sense. So this, combined with the collision of the death of Richard Wagner, who was one of the most important people in Bruckner's mind as far as a mentor and a musical figure, that loss triggered in him actually the second movement of the Seventh Symphony, which is probably the most important utterance in that symphony, and it draws upon the instruments that Wagner created, the Wagner Tuben, which he wrote into his ring cycle. And so the existence of that sound inside this symphony is an important aspect of the, I guess you'd call it, the means of trying to express his unbelievable, regard for this man in his life. Doing this project requires a great deal of planning,
right,
with finding the right speakers to come in who I think will be able to work inside our environment well. What we need to do is bridge the world of scholarship into performance, and that is not done actually as a matter of course in schools, music
right,
schools, which is unfortunate and I think a loss. And we have, I brought in a number of important scholars who are in the field of musicology, important contributors to the various composers we've worked with. And when they get up to speak, there's a gravity to what they're saying, and as great as the effect of playing the music, these people represent the great effect of having studied and learned these people and what they do. And the combination of those two things, well, the hope is that there is a synergy there that brings depth to the student's mind of how much more they can grasp the meaning of the music. Because without this context, it's a more shallow experience. The conductor will say a lot, of course, but the conductor has to put the performance together quickly, and in any with any of the programs we do. But the works that we talk about to study and work on that one piece through a cycle is pretty unusual for us to have that luxury. So in a way, it gains on a lot of different fronts. The purpose and the motivation for me to create such a program at a school of music was to, in some way, simulate what I got as a student when I was in school, which was to have, in my case, a conductor who was deeply concerned with students understanding more than just the notes, and who spent time really parsing out the background information that would help us understand, how to play a Verdi overture. So we were required to do certain things before we came to the next rehearsal, and it was an unusual way to go about doing the same thing I'm doing, but it got me to understand that without that background, we are not really giving students the right tools, I think, to become satisfied musicians throughout their lives. Meaning that if you don't understand what you don't know, you'll never know what you're missing. So my whole philosophy is to put it right front and center how immense the subject of playing a piece of music is, that it requires more than just getting the music and putting it in front of your stand and fingering it and bowing it. Therein lies a very a road to not much satisfaction, potentially boredom, potentially getting bitter, potentially being a lot of things that music should never be for a person. So to stimulate the mind and the curiosity of a musician, a young musician at this point in their development, is the main thrust of this project, so that it is, in a sense, exemplary of the way I study music, the way I feel that it's going to be gratifying to continue to be a musician. And, you know, beyond that, I can just only sit back and hope. I mean, these things will take root eventually, you know, like they did for me. I realized that when I didn't do things a certain way, I didn't feel right. I didn't feel clean. I didn't feel like I knew how to actually handle the situation in a way that I had grown accustomed. So it became my custom to do it. And I'm very lucky to have a huge library that my husband left me, and so my references and my resources are kind of, I don't know, they're sort of out of sight. So I feel very fortunate. I mean, you know, my life is accumulation of many, as with all of us, many lucky turns. And you could say it's luck, or you could just say, I saw what I had, and I was grateful for what I had. So we have our 6 rehearsals before the performance, and traditionally I've had 2 speakers come in to do 2 presentations. In some cases they've been very long and hefty presentations. Some of them have allowed us to actually have a rehearsal at the end of their presentation, which is actually pretty wonderful to be able to come out of the explorations of that speaker and go right into the piece. We might do that today, because today, in fact, is the second day of our cycle, and the speaker's coming in, and he's one of our own faculty members from the music theory department, Blair Johnston, who's, okay, let's just say, if I'm an enthusiast, I am small compared to his enthusiasm. He is rocket fuel enthusiastic about music, and he knows what he's talking about, and it's going to be a thrilling session today. I'm very excited for everybody. So we will then, this session will occur. We'll have another rehearsal Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday. But Blair's going to come back, and we're going to have a little follow-up maybe on Friday, because he's got a lot of material, and we thought maybe it would be good to sort of segue one more time with him, so that, especially because he wants a lot of interaction with the students. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important, because it's not about just blah, blah, here it is, but, you know, it's blah, blah. What did you hear? How do you react to that, having just played this? So today will be mostly him speaking, but also there's going to be examples that the orchestra will play, and that's been the case also with other speakers, which I think is a good policy to bring. In fact, our first one, the Beethoven Fifth Symphony, our speaker brought in a number of failed attempts at the end of the Fifth Symphony that had not been read before. They were in sketches. So he printed out, or actually sent the sketches to the orchestra and asked each of them to print it out. It was like the last 15 bars. And I thought, okay, let's do this. I'm not sure how this is going to come out, because I don't know, will people copy it out right? You know, it was a little risky, but then I learned something. When you give a task of that kind of importance, no one's ever played this before. This is by Beethoven. This is the Fifth Symphony. Well, I think you're going to put a little extra something into that request. So it came out unbelievably excitingly, and it was the first time this particular scholar had heard this music. So for us, I mean, that was just one of those many moments when I think, yeah, this was a good idea. This was a really good idea on all fronts. It's funny, when I came here 10 years ago, no one really knew what I was going to do, including me. I have to tell you. I mean, I came with a lot of, gusto, let's put it that way. You know, as a professional, every week you're going there and you're up at your game every week after every week. And so the motor in me was full blast. I mean, I was still, pretty much in my vigor. I still feel like I have my vigor. I don't know how I do it, but I haven't stopped. So maybe if you don't stop, it doesn't go away until you drop. In any case, when I came, I felt that okay, I've got 5 orchestras. I've only worked in one orchestra, but that was a lot of experience and a lot of effort that took that to really be consistent and artistically polished every week. I can handle this. I mean, teaching is, I've done teaching my whole life. I'm sure I know the subject. I've coached many young orchestras and festivals. I'm sure I can do it. Well, yeah, it was big. It was big. It's a lot of orchestras, and it was an attitude that I had to really reshape. It was not in the custom of the attitude before I got here to have the orchestra be that important in the minds of the students. And I'm putting that loosely out there, okay? I'm putting it loosely. The conductors did what they had to do, but I don't think there was anybody else kind of feeding the fire quite aside from the conductor. And the conductor can only do so much, is my opinion, in this environment. So coming in and having the conductors not feel that I was usurping their role, but coming in and establishing that I was a second voice that was monitoring and being sure that the attitude and the physical style of the way people came in looked professional. I mean, yeah, when people come in with hats, I'm sorry, that's got to go. If you're sitting there with your legs crossed like this, and a little drink by your side, that's got to go. I mean, all right, the drink can stay, but the feet can't be like that. I mean, there was a certain etiquette, and it took everything I had for the first 3 or 4 years to build that kind of respect for them, of themselves in the orchestra. That's fine with me. I think that what I'm doing here is a combination of a mission to impart specific knowledge about orchestral playing, but also to build the respect between people in a large community like that. That one person behaving badly really reflects on everybody, and it takes away from the total end result. One person, in my opinion, can do that. And you have to make it clear to that person, not by going up and embarrassing them in front of everybody else, but sitting quietly next to them at the intermission and saying, here are the reasons why you can't do that in an orchestra rehearsal. Trust me. There was a guy that came in with his bare feet. I'll never forget him. And I liked this guy. I really liked this guy. I liked the way he was, bare feet and crossed. And I thought, all right, what am I going to do with this guy? So, I had a number of conversations. Eventually, he put his shoes and socks on. Eventually, he came to my rep classes. Eventually, he came to really feel grateful for that small piece of advice that brought him into an awareness that there's certain things you just don't cross the line. You can't cross the line. It's out of respect. It's not about me. It's never about me. It's about the respect for the subject at hand. So it's been a big mission, and I feel that the behind the score is it's the content of what I believe is important in music, that focuses on the content and how the content is rich, and it deserves our attention to understand how rich it is.